Hello, welcome to the Fourth Universalist Society Pop Culture and Theology series. I'm Colin Wolfe, Assistant Director of Religious Education, and this will be the fourth in this series. We have covered things like the Legend of Zelda video game series and fantasy book series such as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. And today we have our excellent director of music, Sean Mays, to talk about a broad and exciting category, music and theology. So, Sean, welcome and thank you so much. I leave it to you to kick things off for us.
Thanks, Colin. And thank you everyone for being here and thank you, Ember, even though I know you'll be joining. It's great to chat and to discuss this topic and when Ember and I initially discussed around bringing this forth as something to chat about, I was excited because I feel like one of the biggest things that I always get asked here as director of music at Fourth U is how do you come across and come about making the decisions that you make in terms of how music gets chosen, right, and how music intersects with our our congregational life, right, what we enjoy coming in to listen to, and how that in the broadest sense keeps us connected to faith, right? And we'll go into detail of some of this stuff, and I think some of my thoughts around the nature of music being, of course, linked to worship, and with a title such as this, music and theology. I mean, of course, there's many ways that you could access it, but I think for the purposes of our conversation today and hopefully our discussion with everybody, for those of us who have thoughts and I hope can add to the discussion, really think about what is this idea of theology, right? What is theology? And in essence, boiling that down to any sort of nature of the divine, right? And then when we bring that sort of big word into it, what is the divine, and what is the divine, particularly in the context of what we do at Fourth U, and as I say, as we'll get to this in discussion, how what we do at Fourth U is not, of course, the same as what gets done in a lot of other UU circles as well, and I take a very particular approach to that, which again will come out in some of our discussion today. So I'm hoping, again, it's not necessarily going to be as specifically a discussion of sort of century by century in terms of how music has played into worship, although of course I'll allude to that, but I do want to use some specific examples, and I'll what I do on a regular basis is, of course, I keep a running track record in terms of the music that we use, so I hope to actually even call in some of those services and speak to some very general themes that we explore in our services, talk about some of the music that we've used, and sort of break it down and sort of look at that as an approach to the diversity of music and how we access music as faith and as theology as well. So that's my hope.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sean. I think we're all very excited. Do you want to and begin with narrowing our focus specifically to how theology and music intersect at Fourth U? What makes that a distinct experience, a distinct venue for that category?
Yeah. So I guess at a broader sense, it's sort of filtering it all down, right? So I think one of the interesting things at Fourth U, which has always been so unique for me, as a director of music and as somebody who's responsible for the programming of music in a religious context specifically, and speaking just to bring this into to light for everybody, because I'm not sure if everybody is even familiar with this. I've played in a number of different denominations, most of those being Christian, previous to my time at Fourth U, and again, all of those in different ways, and even across like some different interfaith faith stuff that I've done in my time as a director of music for different congregations and different faiths. It's interesting to see how music plays into truly the identity of what a congregation is, right? And so there's and further to that, how that identity sort of distills itself and distinguishes itself from the identity of possibly the larger denomination as a whole. And so that's been no different. That's been no different at Fourth U for sure. I, as a music director, have always been interested, and particularly, I think, in the context of religious, in terms of church and coming to a building together as a congregation. I've always been interested the most in being able to have a palette that's wide, right? Being able to access an entire range of music that is sensitive to, obviously, being being sensitive in terms of who we are drawing our sources from, who we are borrowing from, but being eye-opening, right? And being as much as possible, as wide as possible, a celebration of the human experience, right? And I think that ultimately we come to church and we come to worship, no matter who we are, right? No matter what faith we come from, I think that we come to that with a true desire to find out just that, right? To distill the human experience. And so, of course, music is and has always been a part of our human experience. And so, if we take ourselves sort of back in time a bit and we think about that at a larger level, it's fascinating even to realize, for as long as humankind has worked through determined stories of our existence, of how we've come to be, of why we're here, what we should be doing while we're here. As long as we've been doing that, there's also sort of been this simultaneous run of music and our ability as beings and as creatures on this earth to be able to create music and to be able to use sound and to use truly, again, it's beautiful because it's even scientific, right? When you really boil down to it, right? We identify with sound as humans and as beings for so many reasons, right? And even on the very scientific level, right? It's like, why do we find music comforting, or why can we find music jarring, right? Why do certain sounds on literally a specific frequency, if we're talking about the scientific specifics of it, why can you hold a baby and sing a song and comfort a child? Why is a mother's voice connected to a child so comforting, right? And so when as humans, as we figured out how to kind of flesh this out and transfer it, not just from the voice as well, which I think personally is one of the more one of the most rawest and beautiful forms of human expression in terms of the singing voice, but I think as we've obviously developed and evolved as human beings, so as our ability to create musical instruments that also have expanded our ability to communicate, to connect, to feel, right? And so when you sort of look at how those paths have gone together, of course, it makes sense that naturally music, and I mean music on instrumental and a vocal level, has found its way into worship, into literally into ritual, right? If we think about it at a broader sense and at a historical sense. And so it's fascinating, and it's fascinating also to see, like, you know, as we move through history, that comes in and out, right? So you have times of human history where, you know, as the church and as churches and faiths institutionalize worship, you have these moments where, you know, people would say, well, you know, is it the human is the human voice appropriate for worship? Are certain instruments appropriate for worship? Right? We see that indicated very differently across different faith texts as well, right? Some which embrace it more wholeheartedly, some which don't, right? But but I think again, it kind of goes to this, like, this massive idea of music and worship has always been interlinked, right? And you can't, and sound, right? And so for me, for us in a very, very contemporary setting in a very particular context, where we're at, you know, as a progressive community in one of the most progressive cities in the world, you know, I look at it as best as possible as my responsibility and my obligation to ensure that our music is reflective of that. And so, you know, that includes not only just finding a contemporary approach to things, but also utilizing historically what we can, not only of our faith, but again of a sonic human experience, to draw those sorts of things in, and explore, you know, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, really explore this link to finding what our theology is, particularly, again, as we'll talk about soon, as you use, and then furthermore, specifically in our congregation. And truly a link to the divine, right? And what that means, right? That everybody who walks into our building, which is very different from, you know, many other congregations, and, you know, even past congregations I've been in, right? You walk in, you have a link to the divine. Everybody generally knows in other places what that link is, right? If you're in a Christian church, you're speaking of the divine, you're speaking of this specific connection to Christ, to spirit, right? As you understand it, as the Christian faith puts forward, right? At Fourth U, that's not the case, right? And so you have literally everybody from people who do believe in, you know, in some sort of higher essence, spirit, you know, God, however you want to term that, to people who literally don't, right? At the most humanist form. And so then there's that, right? Musically, how do you access all of those different angles? And I think the interesting thing with music is that there are many ways musically that you can, music can be that sort of equal ground, in ways where sometimes even text fails us, right? Sometimes text has to be specific in a certain way. And, you know, I'll talk about this later on, but one of the most interesting things is choosing music, and people probably don't think or realize how much time it takes, and how much time on a weekly basis I put in, literally hours I put into thinking about what we're going to use. But we'll get to that, and I hope that's a question that comes up again, because it's one of the biggest parts of the job. So yeah, that's as the sort of the broadest thought on it, I think, too, right? Just how do we connect all of that together in terms of a higher understanding of ourselves and why we're actually coming to Fourth U in the first place, which I think is what we're here to find.
Yeah, thank you so much, and for that anthropological and historical perspective as well, and that fascinating idea that this thing that we think of as sort of the ultimate subjective medium can have very objective mathematical facts identified in it. Yeah. And so there's this just kind of bringing together some of the things you said. There's the question of music as a connection to the divine, with respect to its immediate sphere of reference, like the language of the divine, when the text actually introduces terms like God and spirituality. And then there's a more kind of nebulous use of music connecting to the divine as kind of divine in and of itself, or a bridge to the divine, the vehicle for it. Do you have a personal take on that, and how that informs your selective process in this sort of sometimes hazy ecumenical space that is a Unitarian Universalist congregation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you kind of just you nailed it with the last, the last part of that sentence, right? Is that, a part of it is in realizing that, we as a I think a faith that again really encourages utilizing utilizing the tools of our faith in order to have to sort of feed intellectual discovery and intellectual exploration, right? I think that's an interesting thing, right? Like, and I think it's a facet. It took me a long time to sort of grapple with this notion of like, as you use, we really intellectualize our way through a lot of things when it comes to faith, right? And like, of course, as we know, at a different level, I think than arguably, some other faiths do approach. That's not saying that others don't, of course, but we do pride ourselves, I think, in terms of engaging in that sort of discourse and that sort of, So I think part of what my job is, in a sense, is I'd like to think about it is really as providing, and this is why I like to try and give context in terms of all the music that I play, right? Because there's so much that we can extract, right, from the music that gets brought in, and not only just like the literal sonic experience of sitting listening to XYZ sonata in such and such key, which on, again, like a strictly scientific level, that might that might be like a key that speaks to us in a certain regard, or has, again, certain sonic qualities to it that move us in one way or another. But also just like, the context around why that song exists and why we're listening to it in this particular context, right? Is it congruent with what we're talking about? Is it not? And if it isn't, why are we exploring it in this context, right? And so and like, who writes it, right? What is their path? Who did they come? Where did they come from? What was their journey in order to get to writing that piece of music, and how does that journey back to us? So, all that to say, I think that everybody is going to have a different access in terms of like what that ultimate goal of finding, musical spiritual enlightenment is, right? And it's somebody said once to me something which I find really interesting, and I try and take this with me in all of my work as a literally as a director of music, but a director of faith in that regard, in using music in faith, and in worship. And somebody said to me once, we all have songs that we love, and we all have songs that we hate, right? When we are sitting in a church context, and people were always quick to be like, I love this song. And then when we really don't like something, we're quick to be like, I really don't. Yeah, or to turn ourselves off to it. But what I think we have to remember as a community, supporting one another in a journey that we are using music and musical examples to enlighten ourselves along, is that something that we really hate is going to be something that literally could be the difference of another spiritual step or spiritual moment for somebody else listening to the exact same thing, right? And that's a powerful thing when you consider that, right? And so again, it's this idea for me is like, I'm never going to play or offer or bring in, music, musicians, pieces, styles, genres that are going to hit every single check mark for every single person in every service, and that's not the point, right? And that's where, again, tying this back to sort of our approach and our belief as you use, right? We can exist in a space together, and I think what we have to be able to do is we have to be able to exist in a space together, but we have to be able to also be like, right, if this is a moment for somebody, realizing that a moment that's not for you is not just a moment that's only not for you. It's a moment for somebody else, right? And so I think musically that's the case, absolutely, right? Obviously we want to try and make stuff as aesthetically pleasing all the time as we can, and hopefully most of the time it is. But that's I think it's an interesting thing, at least on that approach for me in thinking about how we use music for sure.
So, Sean, I obviously had a podcast recording with you where we talked a little bit about your selection of music. And as somebody who also has to prepare things for Sunday, I also know how much work can go in behind the scenes. So I'd be curious, could you walk us through a little bit of like the selection process of how do you select music for like a Sunday?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Amber. I mean, yeah, so it's and one of the interesting things I think, especially here at Fourth U, is considering how we really gear our services very thematically, right? And so what I would encourage all of us, as community members to consider and to think about, is and not just from me, from all of our leaders, right? Is the degree to which the amount of energy it takes to make one service actually make sense from beginning to end and all be connected together, right? And it's as simple in certain moments of like I'll give you a perfect example, and of course we thematically we arrive at the themes for services in a variety of different ways. Of course, a great deal of that leadership comes from Reverend Schuyler, but we, as an entire staff community, we discuss potential ideas, possibilities, right, around themes, around events. Obviously, we try to keep things relative. We try and keep things current, right? So we never, which is very unlike what I was used to. Like in the Christian tradition, you can know a full year in advance what you're going to be playing in June because it's all based on the scriptures, and there's a lectionary, and you follow that course, right? Here we could be in elections in 2 weeks and have a completely different result and have to use a service to anchor ourselves and motivate ourselves in a completely different direction that we didn't think we would be in 2 weeks prior. So it means it's very, very present, and it means that usually, to be very honest, I'm not able to actually look at the music and really, 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 really focus in until roughly about the week before. Usually the week before, maybe a couple. If it's a month in advance, that's really, really good. That's good timing on our behalf. When it gets to that point of trying to think through, okay, like what are we actually going to do here? Obviously the easy way in is considering textually what we can offer, right? But the limitations in that obviously are that not all music includes text, right? And so sometimes it's a question of having to consider how do we you know how do we utilize, and I think one instance I'll bring back into memory for us that I really struggled with, admittedly, was our service around cancel culture a little while ago. And I mean, without exaggeration, I have to say it was probably like the estimate of like the entire number of hours that I have for the week that I spent on searching for music for that, because your first go to and the easy way into it is to think about, right, okay, what songs are there out there that specifically speak to cancel culture, right? Like that, like have cancel culture in the lyrics that talk about, and of course there is stuff that is like that, but when I actually like was diving into it, I was like, well, this is actually kind of hard, right? It's really tough, and there's not as much as we would think. And then again, this points back to, it depends on how relevant something is, and I say relevant in the regard of how present, right? How present it is, right, to a particular moment. And obviously that's immensely present. It's evolving, and it's again, we're looking at something that's really in recent consciousness. So there's not like this massive score of music that I could look at. Whereas like something like today, our theme of wisdom, it's much easier to find songs about wisdom, right? We have genres thematically in music we know, right? That's like the number one topic of most songs, right? Well, we talk about love, right? And we talk about, right? Of course. Why do we do that? Well, it's because as human beings, that's, that's kind of top of, that's top, one of the top priorities for us, I think, is understanding each other as humans and learning how to love, right? Cancel culture, maybe not always as much, right? And so what we did, what I arrived at was an interesting, different way into it, which was utilizing the music of Beethoven. And the reason around that was because Beethoven, there had been recent talk of canceling Beethoven from some circles, right? And so what that did was, it wasn't a direct, you don't listen to those notes on the page, and you don't hear cancel culture. But what we could do is, again, that's the other side of the scale, where we use it as an entry point and as a discussion to say, right, okay, well, if this is what is linked to this theme of cancel culture, right, let's listen to this music and consider that, and again, keep just, it's all about expanding that, not only the emotional and the spiritual side of it, but that intellectual curiosity as well, right, as we dive into those themes. But it's an interesting process. I'll usually sit with it for a couple of days. I try and see what songs or themes or composers come naturally to my brain. Admittedly, I try to give it time so that I know that I can be as diverse in the thought around it as possible, right? So, i.e., not trying to select four songs that all include songwriters who are roughly the same age, who came of the same era, who are all men, who are all, trying to find that, right? And of course, that's that sort of exploration also requires a curiosity on my behalf, right? Because it requires me to go away and say, right, okay, well, as the phrase goes, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so what I've always been interested in this particular role, which I find fascinating, and this is maybe some of you might even remember, we've had services. We had a service on balance, and we used the entire service was all with singing bowls, and was all with sound meditation, which was very different, right? And so that on a different level was not only that was like kind of a combination of both camps. It was sort of this sonic grounding of actually using this sound, this music, which is proven to help in terms of focus and balance and control of that for us, but also in thinking like, oh, right, like I remember when we did that service, and Sheila I remember Sheila mentioned to me, and she was like, yeah, I remember the service starting, I remember the music starting, and thinking, oh, okay, like something else is going to happen. And she was like, and then nothing else changed. And she was like, oh, and then she's like, I had to settle into it very quickly, and how cool that was, right? And that always that stays with me and resonates with me, right? Because those are the moments we want, right? Is to also challenge and say, oh, like, great, I'm sitting here and I'm waiting for, here's where the hymn starts and here's where the words come in, and it's like that's not all. We have a very, very, all of us, I think, arguably have a very, very specific view as to what music is, because we listen to what we know, right? And I would pose that question to all of us here. When is the last time that you opened your Spotify and literally just tried to find music from a country that you've never even heard of or never even listened to, right? That's a real, it's a real thing, right? And it's a real thing for us as people who proclaim to want to be diverse in our approach and our thinking. We have to apply that to all elements of our life, and I've gotten better at that. I have a lot to learn, certainly, and it doesn't mean that it all sits with me naturally. But again, part of the process in terms of trying to bring that to our doorstep, for sure.
So obviously you highlighted some that were particularly challenging services, whether with the bowls or with the cancel culture. And I have to admit that, even, gosh, was that a little bit over a month ago now? That music still stands. I'm like, oh yeah, that was that service. We had that music, so it stands out. I'm curious if maybe you have like one or two favorite like services where you just felt like, yes, like this was, my best picks, that this went so well. And I'd be curious on to hear about those.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like for me, and this is something that has become very different to read online, of course, than it is in person. We all, I think, know what it feels like when a service lands exactly the way we want it to, right? There's a very real energy in the room and the space that carries over into coffee hour when we've checked all those boxes, right? And maybe not even checking the boxes is the right way, but like I like to think about as connecting the dots, right? And so Reverend Schuyler and I would talk about that often, and we'd I'd sort of say, well, some of the best services that we feel like we have is when I choose music and I walk away feeling like, Ember and Colin, it has supported what you both wanted to do with religious education that week. And in turn, that has also supported what Reverend Schuyler has said in his sermon. Or even better yet, where one of the lines in a song has been quoted in the sermon, or and those, you know what I mean, and those are the connections where it's like, boom, everything is on the same page, right? We're all moving in synchronicity together. So in terms of like favorite services, that's definitely, as at a general level, at a sort of an idealistic level, that's my favorite service. But I feel like we've had I'll share a couple again talking about oh, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, like Let It Be, right? Or yeah, and again, like that's like just those moments of like that's what we try and seek, right? Is the connectivity of it, because then it's like, yes, we're existing in that synchronicity. And I remember I had some of these pulled up in terms of some past services, so I'll give you some examples even in terms of kind of when it's sort of links together. Some of my favorite services, we did one service. Geez, wow, it's almost going to be 2 years, because it would have been 2019 in the fall, which is unbelievable. But looking at what are the bigger themes, like sometimes, and this is something that we talked about in the lead up for our chat today, right? I was thinking about, obviously sometimes our themes are very specific, like cancel culture. Sometimes they are more, you know, existence based, right? We talk about, our purpose here, and remembrance, right? And spirit, remembering people, and remember, and spirit, and life and death, truly. And one of the services, just to give a range of the music that you could have in a service, we did, it was a Remembrance Sunday, and so it was a range of different instrumental and vocal approaches. And we had 5 pieces in that service. One was a piece called In Remembrance, which was done by a Canadian composer named Eleanor Daly, which I love, which I think speaks very poignantly to, the text of it starts, do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. Right. So that existed in a choral setting. Then we moved on to breaths, Sweet Honey in the Rock, right? Again, obviously some very obvious connections there in terms of the same sort of sentiment. But then sort of, again, that balance, right? You're looking at a vocal group also of women, also women of color, right? Which again, thinking about all of these different connections and different perspectives, right? Because everybody coming to listen to music also is thinking through a different perspective. Moved to Fire and Rain by James Taylor, right? Sometimes it just comes full circle, something that we know. Then we had some Lady Gaga, Always Remember Us This Way, right? And then this beautiful setting of When the Sun Comes After Rain, right? If you know the poem as well. And by another a young male composer, right? Canadian male composer. So again, like just for me, I think another win is just when it can be that diverse, right? When it can be like a bunch of different different sounds all combined together, and they all link back to the same theme. And what does that tell us? It tells us that, truly, as we broaden and as music, we listen to different styles of music, and of course there's many more, but like as we listen to different styles of music, it's that's where we get to when we talk about it being a universal language, right? Where we talk about being something that everybody can use to access similar points of existence. So that's one example. Thanksgiving is always one of my favorite services. I think I mentioned that in terms of the music. Just always fun and a beautiful, a poignant theme that you can make fun and also relative. And there's so many great songs in that realm as well. And there's a few services where I try and establish tradition. I think I talked about this on the podcast as well. The where everybody knows your name. We always try and do that when there's a new group of folks who come in. I always try and do some of the Charlie Brown Christmas stuff around Thanksgiving, because there's that Thanksgiving theme, right? So again, we have to think about that multiplicity of identity in every range, right? And that's certainly true of age as well. Thinking of our youth and our young people in the congregation and how they access music and how they think about that as well. So I think that's what I would say as far as, some of the favorites at least.
So we've talked a little bit about like the whole being online. I'm curious if you could reflect maybe a little bit about how that's changed the process for you. I mean, I've only known
Yeah.
Fourth online and only known Fourth music online. So how has COVID impacted the work you do here at Fourth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, immensely so, of course. Music is at the most boiled down element. It's vibration, right? And so as human beings, we feel vibration in a space together. That's part of why people enjoy singing together in space, because part of it is being able to feel the actual physical vibration of the creation of notes, right? Of air and the utilization of to create pitch and et cetera, et cetera. So that's a hard thing to replicate online. And you can replicate the joy that comes from individual pleasure in listening to music. It's a little harder to replicate the collective community that happens when everybody is on the same page. Now, I think we've gotten pretty good at it, and I think as a community, we've done tremendous things, and musically, all around the last year, but musically as well. And it's one of the things that I think about. I mean, one of the interesting things that is kind of a plus of the pandemic and being online is that ultimately we're using a different media to get music across to everybody. So for me, it means that one of the biggest things I despise about sometimes doing music live is that it can be hard if you want a whole number of songs vocally. It can be hard when my voice is the only voice singing those songs for a few songs, right? And anyone who knows me, guest musician, those of us on the choir, I always say this, right? I don't like being one of the only voices in the room, because I don't think that doesn't give us the right sort of access, right? We should be listening to, and on every level, but in the actual even singing and creation of music. Nobody wants to necessarily listen to me sing 5 songs in a row in different styles, so we try, and I've always tried to be mindful of that. I try and make that a part of when we are in person, I try and make that a part of how we do that work in person as well. But I think online, one of the best things we can do is that, I can do a couple of songs with me singing, and then I can share something that comes from literally another voice, right? And I can get out of the way and let someone else's voice speak through what they've created in their own music, right? And so you see that, I think, in most of my weeks. I try and I'll do a couple songs, of course, but I try and at least have always one form of media that's not me, that's a video, and I think the videos are great as well, right? Because it also that's a whole other element of it too, right? We experience music, but we don't always just experience music on our own, right? Sometimes we watch and we listen to things that accompany that, audio and video accompany one another. So that's one thing I've really actually enjoyed about it, and for all the things I won't miss when we go back to being in person soon, I will miss that. But again, we're talking about ways to try and keep that positive part of music, of the music portion of the services, hopefully a part of what we do when we go back in person, which I'm thankful for. It's good to have the opportunity to explore on that level as well.
I would love to follow up on that, Sean, by bringing into the conversation your work in the performing arts and entertainment sphere as well. Just before we started this session, we were talking about your working on the Come From Away production in Finland, and on that note about not always wanting to be the sort of spotlit element all the time.
Yeah.
I wondered how much of, and also on the note of sort of trying to identify what is the divine in the musical experience, how much of that is transferable to your work in what's regarded as more the pure entertainment area? How much of it is non-overlapping? Do you approach that sense of the like sacred when you're in, musical theatrical spaces as well, or is it a totally different quality?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Colin. I really do. I really do. I think that it's part of the reason why I've always loved both worlds, and why the worlds complement each other so much for me. In my theatrical work, I guess for context for everybody as well, it can range from anything I mean, most of my work is as a musical director, right? And so what that means on a production is that I'm responsible for teaching. In a musical, I'm responsible for teaching the music vocally and instrumentally to to the performers, to a band or an orchestra that eventually plays that music live, and then ultimately when the show opens, I'm responsible for leading that, but it's always usually done from behind, right? I'm not a featured performer in that. And so I think that philosophy has always led my approach to, excuse me, how I how I like to approach music as a leader, right? I think it's important to embody others to find their voice, in the most literal sense of the word, right? To be able to find the space and the time to create. I personally think that I think the stage, a practitioner I work with often, who's very near and dear to me, and very close to me, she talks about the stage being an altar, right? And I do truly believe that, and I believe that because I think, again, it's like, why, this idea of, well, why do we use music in theater, right? Like, what is theater? Theater is another form of us telling stories of our existence and trying to contend with why we exist, right? And how, and again, I think truly trying to discover the divine, right? It's just another form. And so, some people, on all levels, some people, we think about it as quote unquote entertainment, which of course it is. But it's more than that, right? We have determined, I think, as a world, again, all through culturally, just as much as music, there have always been stories and storytellers, right? That's how we learn. That's how we pass knowledge from generation to generation, and the theater does that, right? And so I do think of my work in theater as in that level being sacred too. And I think especially as a musician in theater, it's about creating music in a way that people can come in, access, and sit in a space together as human beings on an equal journey, having an equal human experience, learning something about our shared humanity, and listen to a piece of music or a song together and have to go, oh, that made me feel a certain way. Why did that do that? Right? I think that's one of the most interesting things, right? And that's just the power of music in so many levels, right? Like, they say your sound when it's time for us to leave this earth, they say your sound is the last thing. It's the first thing you have, and it's the last thing that goes in terms of your senses, right? And so, as I say, I mean, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist on that level. But that's what I've heard, and so it's interesting to consider that, right? Is that there's something physically inside of us too that resonates on that, and so I think again, like it's even church is a theatrical experience in that sense as well, right? There's it's storytelling. It's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, and we repeat that story, and we repeat that story until we understand it or try and understand it as best as we can. So yeah, I do find a lot of interplay between the worlds, which is very cool for me for sure.
So, Sean, these have been some wonderful, amazing reflections that I've enjoyed getting to listen to. Is there any final thought you'd want to share before we open up to a question and answer time? Anything you just want to get out there before we transition?
I don't think so. I think just I again like in the most humble sense of it too. Just wanting to share how much I you know the use of the word sacred is so interesting, and I don't think it's something to throw around, which is why I say this in all seriousness, that I really do think of my work as sacred work. I think that again that we all of us who are so blessed to lead and partake in helping to help people access their spirituality, right, their faith together. um that's big stuff, right? That's big stuff, and it's nothing to mess around with, right? And so musically, I that's kind of how I approach it, and I every time I sit behind a piano, or I try and raise my hands for that, I really do try and think about, you know everybody comes in needing something that day, right? We don't just we have routine, but nobody just comes to church just because, right? Like we all seek something else deeper in that, right? And so if music is gonna be a part of that experience, for me, I'm like, it's got to be right. You got to get it right, and so I hope that's the sentiment that people I hope people feel that, when I hope as a community we feel that. I try and bring my heart to it, and again, it doesn't mean that we all don't have discovery and learning to do along the way, but that's what we do. That's our journey as beings together on this earth. We learn and we discover together, and I'm fortunate to have a community that's open and receptive to doing that in a variety of ways musically, and I hope we'll continue to be into the future. And I'm really excited for all of the things that I'm excited for back in person too, what that will look like, and how we continue to find that as well.